Hey guys, R4GE VipeRzZ, and today I'm going to show you how you can tell if a motherboard will support a CPU. So the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out what type of socket your CPU uses. So the socket is the connector that connects the CPU and the motherboard. So the socket is what you're going to be putting the CPU into on the motherboard. Now if you've bought a new CPU in this day and age, it will either be made by AMD or Intel. So if I just open up Chrome, I have the AMD page open for the Ryzen 9 3900X, and I also have the page open for the Intel i7 13700K. So on the specs page for the CPU, you need to find where it says CPU socket. So as you can see down here, it says CPU socket, and it says AM4 for this AMD Ryzen 9 3900X. So that is the socket type that this CPU uses. Now if we come to the Intel page, and we scroll down in the package specifications section, as you can see it says CPU socket supported. Now Intel is a little different with the way they label their sockets on their specifications. For some reason they put down the CPU production type. So for example, this is a flip chip, that's what the FC stands for, but the LGA and then the number is the socket type, so this is the LGA 1700. So LGA stands for Land Grid Array, and that is the sockets that Intel are currently using. So as you can see, this i7 13700K uses the LGA 1700 socket. So now we know the type of socket that our CPU is using, we now need to look at the motherboard and see what type of socket it has. So I have this Gigabyte motherboard here, and we need to look at the CPU socket type. So if we come to specification, and then as you can see under CPU, the first thing it lists is the socket type. So this motherboard has the LGA 1700 socket, so that means that it has the same socket as this CPU. Now if we come to this page for an ASUS motherboard, again if we just click on tech specs, again in the CPU section it will then tell you the socket type. So this motherboard uses an AM5 socket. Now if we come back and look at our AMD CPU here that we have up, that is AM4, so that means that this CPU will not work with this motherboard as it is not the same socket. Now if we come over to ASRock, again if we click on specification, and then we look in the CPU section, as you can see here it says socket, and that is 1151. So that will work with LGA 1151 socket CPUs. And then finally if we come to MSI and we look at the specs for this motherboard, so if we click specifications, and we scroll down, as you can see this is socket AM4, so that is the same socket as this AMD CPU that we have here, that is AM4. So if the socket type of the motherboard does not match with the socket type of the CPU, then they will not work together. Your motherboard needs to have the same socket type as the CPU. Now once you made sure that the motherboard socket type is the same as the CPU socket, you then need to check the CPU support list. So if I come back to the page for the Gigabyte motherboard, and then I click support, and then I click CPU support, you can then see the list of all the CPUs that this motherboard supports. Now it will tell you which motherboard version the CPU is supported since. So as you can see there is only currently one motherboard version FA, but if there were different motherboard versions, you would need to have a look at what specific BIOS version a CPU started getting support from. If the CPU model isn't on the CPU support list, then it will not work with the motherboard. So if we look at the support list for an ASUS motherboard, again we can just come to support, and then we can click on CPU/memory support. As you can see here it lists the CPUs that are supported, and it tells you the BIOS versions that it was supported since. So as you can see the 7950X is supported on all of the BIOS versions, however the 7950X 3D has only been supported since the BIOS version 1303. So if the motherboard was running an older BIOS version, then it wouldn't work with this CPU. Now if we come over to ASRock, and again we click on support, and we can then click CPU support list, it will then show us all the CPUs that this motherboard supports, and again the BIOS versions that it's supported since. And finally on an MSI motherboard, you can come up to the top and click on support. Now MSI does it a little differently. You have to instead click on compatibility, and then it will show you the different types of compatibility, with CPU being the first one. So here again is the list of all the CPUs that are supported by this motherboard, with the motherboard BIOS version that it has been supported since. So just to recap, if the motherboard has the same socket as the CPU, and is listed on the CPU support list, then it should work with the motherboard. However, if your CPU isn't supported on all versions of the BIOS, you need to make sure that the motherboard that you are buying will be shipped to you with the BIOS version that is new enough for your CPU, again if it's not supported on all versions of the BIOS. So for example, if a new CPU was released partway through the life cycle of the motherboard, then a BIOS update will likely have been put out in order for it to support the newer CPU. But obviously if the motherboard that you get was running an older version of the BIOS that was created before the new CPU was released, then it wouldn't work with the new CPU. You would need the motherboard to be either updated to that version by whoever you were buying it off, or some motherboards do have options to update the BIOS over a USB, but usually you need to have a CPU in the socket. But as long as you've made sure the motherboard has the same socket as the CPU, is on the CPU support list, and is running the minimum BIOS version for your given CPU, then it should work with it. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you liked it, don't forget the like button. If you disliked it, hit the dislike button. Subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you another time. Bye.